Alright everybody, it's about that time. I've messed up my sleeping pattern, ready for the Shanghai Major. We got the pick'ems, and stick around because don't just skip to the end. I'm going to give you the reasons why you might want to pick other teams as to the ones I pick as well. Here we go. We're getting into it. Okay, what do we start with? Well, I think we should start with 0-3. Okay, the most obvious pick here. Don't overthink this, guys. Rare Atom are the worst team here. Like, they're just the worst team, and when there's a team that's clearly the worst team, you just pick them, okay? Don't overthink that. Rare Atom go 0-3. And my other one, for me, okay, there's a couple that you could maybe choose between here, but for me, I think it's Wildcard. I do think it's Wildcard. I just did not believe their run at all. Their win against Liquid looked like they were dominated almost the entire time, and then they miraculously brought it back with some pretty awful mistakes from Liquid. Twist said his mouse was messed up in that game. He was getting destroyed on A long. And they had some rounds that looked good, and Stanizor's a good cooler. And they had some rounds where their flashes were nice. But that was about half of the rounds. And the other half of the rounds, I feel like they were just like dry swinging stuff, and they allowed Ultimate to pop off against them a couple of times. I also just don't believe in these players that much. Sonic is meant to be the best rifler on this team. Don't really believe in him that much. I think he's pretty good, but, you know, he's nothing special. And then Fozy on the AWP, whiffing quite a lot. They haven't got, like, that much experience on some of these players. And you've got to remember, there is a crowd at this stage, so keep that in mind. I've got them going 0-3. The only reason I think you would go for another team here is, like, you know, there's a couple. Maybe an Imperial. I don't believe in them much either. FlyQuest will probably grind out a win somewhere, but there aren't that many teams that are way worse. You could believe that Passion UA are just going to absolutely choke because they don't really have many experienced players at all. I don't hate that because even the way they got here, the games they were winning were just sloppy and all over the place and chaos in that one against Astralis. But I think these are the two that make the most sense. Also, for Wildcard, I think there's a pretty good chance they play Cloud9 in their 0-1 match, which is already going to put them in trouble. And there is a chance these two play each other in the elimination match, in the 0-2 match, in some of the draws that I've gone for. But I don't think that's a bad thing in this scenario. I don't think it's awful to just lock in one of these, because remember, we only need 5 correct to advance. So I don't think it's the end of the world if we only get one of these right. On the Rare Atom one, like, yeah, they beat Talon and GR to get here. Not that impressive. And, like, recently online, they've lost against Spirit Academy, Endpoint, Johnny Speeds, Tyloo. You just have to put them here. They're just the worst team by some distance. The only reason you could even try and believe is because they open up against the Mongols. And back in July, they did actually beat the Mongols on a map, and they played some close maps against them. But I don't think the regional matchup is that bad. I don't think it's that much of a thing. And, you know, listen, like, Rare Atom literally lost against Cat Evil, Paravision, and Bleed. So, like, oh, sorry, the Mongols lost against some pretty bad teams in that time as well. They lost against, like, Cat Evil, Paravision, and Bleed. So, yeah, I think you've got to go with them. 3-0. I'm actually going Mongols straight away. Mongols, for me, are the most, like, consistently reliable team here. Okay? They've been in really solid form coming into this event. They've been playing a good amount of tournaments. And, you know, they have Blitz as an in-game leader who I think does so much for this team. The individuals are very sharp on this squad. The only thing that they might have that they're missing is that their individual players sometimes, I don't see them making their own decisions and their own plays to necessarily win rounds. But I think that's fine because it relies more on Blitz's calling, which is just consistently great for this team. He outmaneuvers opponents all the time. They're also a team where they're actually really clutch. In tight scenarios, they oftentimes will win out. And so I really think the Mongols here, they're the team that has the highest floor for me, right? Some of these other teams, like a Liquid or a Furia, they can shit the bed sometimes on certain maps. They can just have that happen. Mongols, they don't have a weak point. And for me, that means I've got to take them as a 3-0. Now, the other team, I think Liquid are definitely in the running. I think, like, Furia and Pain are actually ones to consider. Big, you could even consider. But I'm going with Liquid. Yes, they can lose a best of one. We saw them lose against Wildcard. But overall, they just have that player ability here that should carry them through into a lot of wins. And again, I'm pretty sure in my simulation they get like decently good matchups overall. So I think that Liquid are in pretty good shape. Yes, your Kindar is a problem on this team. Sometimes the calling from Twist isn't great, but when you have Twists and NAF, when you have JKS, you should be good. And Ultimate, I think against this level of competition, he'll be okay. Don't think he'll necessarily have to be great, but he'll be okay. And just that rifling core is so strong that I believe in them to make it. So now that we've got the 3-0, we've got the 0-3, let's go through with the other teams we think will make it. I think I'm going to start with... Oh, you see, it's kind of wide open now, but I'm going to start with the VP. They've, again, just got players that are too good at this stage. And, again, I'm counting experience quite highly here. With there being a crowd at this stage, with there being a bit more pressure on, I think VP are a team that you can believe in to make it through. Now, I don't love the dynamic between Electronic and Jame. And even, like, Fame as this lurky player, I don't think that suits him necessarily. But these players are just so talented that I don't think it matters that much. Jame had a much better performance, and I think this team has adapted their way they're playing slightly. I still think that Electronic isn't, like, fully comfortable on this team, but he's putting up good enough numbers. And Flip seems like he's much more comfortable now. They're really playing to his strengths. So just pure pound-for-pound player quality, VP have to make it through for me. But again, they're one of these teams where the structure of the team tells me I wouldn't be surprised if they drop a map. Okay, up next. I'm chucking Pain in there. I think Pain are a really, really solid team. I think they've got a good chance of making it through. Big Uzera has a really cool calling style. And especially in this sort of Swiss system, he likes to do a lot of lurky stuff. He likes to be a real nuisance as an in-game leader. And I think that will cause a lot of chaos for opponents, especially if they don't get to prepare that well because of this Swiss format. So I think that gives them a good chance. Again, I think they've got a good chance in their opening matchup against Imperial. So I think there's a lot to like about this Pain squad. And compared to some of these other America's qualifiers, I think they offer that little bit of something different. And the rest of the squad is well-rounded. So I like Pain to make it through. I think next... I'm going to go with Big. I really liked what I saw from these guys at the RMR. They were able to beat Heroic, and they did it without Crimbo actually having to perform and carry for them, which is a great sign. I think Rigon is finally getting a chance to play a little more aggressively at times on this team, which I like. And he's not always entering on T side, which is weird, but he's slotting in okay, and he's making some pretty good decisions. And then just in general, again, you have a bit of experience with Tabson calling. You have the Crimbo factor. I think he will show up at this stage, even if he didn't in the previous. Part of that could be that they're just actually winning in the earlier parts of the round anyway, and he's not having to clutch. And then I think Searson, I know his form hasn't been great this year as an AWPer, but I think I've seen enough from him to say he's going to be fine here. He's going to be fine. He did well in the RMR stage. I don't think he'll do as well in this stage, but it'll be good enough. And just the team play of this squad and the cooling shows me they've got enough about them. JDC's doing a good job as well, back into the lineup. So I like Big here from what I saw in that earlier stage. That win against Heroic was very impressive, and I think that gives them a lot of stock. Okay, up next. I do think I go with Cloud9. Heavy God is so good, guys. He's one of the better players at this stage, and it's not just Heavy God. I think IC on the AWP is pretty good, but he can be inconsistent. But I just think the actual backbone of this team is way better than expected. They clearly had a lot of practice coming into this tournament because they didn't get to play many games online, and it really looked like it showed. Boomich and Inters are going to be a pretty weak fragging duo to have as your weaker fraggers. But just because they're not great fraggers doesn't mean they're not still sort of contributing decently to the team. I think Inters is still solid. He always has pretty low numbers, but as a support player, he knows what he's doing. Boomich can sometimes look really lost in his individual play, but I actually think his calls are very good. This team's cohesion looked really solid here. So I believe in Cloud9. And again, they have that experience factor, which is something I'm leaning pretty heavily on. So now we've got two more spots. Who can you consider here? Well, Furia are all over the place, but you've definitely got to consider them just with their players. Complexity, I wasn't that impressed by them at the RMRs in Americas, and they had a couple of scrappy games, and just their overall player quality I don't think is that good outside of Elige. But, again, they have the experience, and some of these players, you just need one or two of them to step up alongside Elige, and suddenly they're a good team, and they could do really well. Fnatic, you've got Blame F. That's the main part of the team, but like you have good supporting pieces around him as well. Don't know if I love Body's cooling, but I think it was a little bit better at this recent stage. Gamer Legion, I mean, they made the magic happen. They're just such an inexperienced team. It's hard for me to believe, but they obviously have, you know, some talent on the roster. MIBR, I think they're pretty good. I just think that the players are quite inconsistent for me. Insani can look very good, can look a bit off. Exit has been fragging really well since he stopped being an IGL, but there's a case to be made. FlyQuest, not for me. I think that they're just a team where they seem like they're capped at not making it through this stage, just with the Australians on the lineup. Alistair, I just don't believe in as an AWPer. When they've won tournaments recently, it's had to be Dexter top fragging, which I just don't believe in. And they have some like decent players, but not enough for me to compete against other teams at this stage. Passion UA, I think they were already pretty scrappy in the previous stage, and that deserves credit, but especially with the inexperience, I wouldn't be picking them here. I think they're 0-3 contenders. And Imperial, again, they've got the experience, but I've just not been that impressed by, like, the team plays a bit below average, and then the players are just average for this stage. They scream to me of like a 2-3 team, maybe 1-3. And so for that reason, okay, I'm going to stop teasing you, Furia fans. Yes, I'm picking Furia. They've just got Keserato and Yuri, which is a huge boost to them. And they did do well at IEM Rio. They haven't done that well throughout the rest of the season. But I think they just have enough in terms of player quality. Again, I'm counting on that pretty big in this stage. I also remember at that previous major at this stage, Fallen actually rolled back the years a bit and had a really good showing. And I think when you have these experienced players, they give that extra bit of grind to this stage of the tournament. That's when you're going to start to see them actually really start to try a bit harder and put a bit of extra hours in. Compared to the rest of the season, where for Fallen, these other random tournaments, he's not going to care as much about, right? He might care about an IEM Rio, but for the rest of the season, he's not going to be as dialed in. I think he will be here, and I think we could see him actually perform pretty well and get on top of things. And yeah, their RMR run wasn't perfect. You know, they lost a BO1, they lost against Liquid, but I think they'll be good enough here. And then the last slot. I think most people would go Complexity or MIBR, but I just did not believe in either of them when I saw them play. It was such a scrappy game. It was so sloppy, and I don't actually think the player quality on these teams is that high. MIBR might have the more well-rounded team. Elige should be one of the best players at this stage, but I just don't believe in Halzerk. He's a pretty average AWPer. Grim and Floppy sometimes take it in turns, sometimes neither of them show up. And it also felt to me like when Complexity were doing well, JT was fragging to unsustainable levels, which he's slipped back from. So in a weird way, I think if you want to be safe, you should go with Complexity. But I was not impressed by their form making it through the RMRs. MIBR to me, they kind of play a bit like a European style of team, but I just don't know if the players are quite there. And it's like they're slightly worse strategically, and maybe their players are close, but they're inconsistent. And so weirdly, I think I go with Fnatic. Nork is just good. He's just pretty solid as an AWPer. He plays a bit safe, but I think that's fine. Blame F, he's playing so active and he knows what he needs to do, and it's just huge for this team. And I think at this stage that will continue. He is being given all the tools to be an incredible player at this stage, and I think that allows him to be better than like a Complexity. I think it allows him to be better than an Elige on Complexity. And so this is currently what I'm going with. Now, if you want some other options, okay, most people will pick Complexity. I've given my reasons why I won't. However, all you need is for Halzerk to play pretty well and one of Grim or Floppy to step up, and this team should make it, but I just haven't seen that out of them recently. They have the ability to do it, but I just don't see this team peaking at the right time. I just see them as a team who they seem to often do well at like the weaker events, and then everyone else starts grinding and these players kind of show they're not as good. And yeah, I just haven't been as impressed by them lately. And then MIBR, definitely one to consider, just because, yes, their players are inconsistent, but on their day, they can beat a lot of these teams. Insani and Exit alone, some of these guys are incredible. So I would consider MIBR. Outside of that, Gamer Legion have an outside shot just from grinding out games, but I've seen them just choke. Like, these players are really inexperienced. They so often get good starts to games, and I think that's because of Ash's game plan and because they're not that stressed. And then once it comes to the players making decisions later on in the game, when it's less obvious what they have to do, they can't just follow the plan because it's getting a bit chaotic, they start to shut down as a team. So I don't quite see them making it through. They scream to me of like a 1-3 or 2-3 team. And then these other guys I've talked about. So I think this is a very solid list of teams, honestly. I'm very happy with this. I really think the wildcard 0-3 shout, I think that's up there for me because I just do not believe in these players that much. And yeah, Stanislav's calling is fine, but I still saw issues with their team play, and their best of one win against Liquid was the most strugglesome best of one win I ever saw. Liquid should not be happy with themselves after that one. Which is funny because I picked Liquid as 3-0, and I know people are going to be confused by that. But I don't think they will be that bad again, especially Twists. The fact that Twist was so off in that game, I think that's part of why the calling just went to shit, and I just don't see Twist playing that badly that often. So let's lock it in. I'll get this coin later, I'll get this pass later, and we'll get that diamond coin together. Thank you guys for watching. The major is here. I'm going to be watching. And yeah, that's it. Why is it not saving? Come on now. Come on, CS. Be serious. Right, I'm going to go do that again. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you next time.